There's a plant growing wild right now in the ditch beside your road, in the empty lot behind your office, in the crack of a parking lot you walked past this morning. You've almost certainly seen it today and thought absolutely nothing of it. But here is what almost nobody knows. That plant, the one everyone calls a weed and tries to kill, contains more complete protein than most grains you pay $5 a pound for. It fed entire civilizations for 8,000 years. It was the sacred food of one of the greatest empires in human history. And then, 500 years ago, it nearly disappeared from the entire world. Not because it stopped working, not because something better replaced it. It disappeared because a conquering empire understood something profound. A population that controls its own food supply cannot be controlled. By the end of this video, you are going to look at that roadside weed very differently. Here is why this plant is so remarkable. Amaranth seeds, the grain produced by the plant most people call pigweed, contain 13 to 17% protein by weight. That is more protein than wheat, more than rice, more than corn, and more than almost every grain in the modern food system. But quantity alone is not the story. The quality is what makes amaranth genuinely extraordinary. Amaranth contains all 9 essential amino acids, the ones your body cannot manufacture on its own. That makes it a complete protein. In the grain world, complete proteins are almost unheard of. Wheat is not complete. Rice is not complete. Corn is not complete. Amaranth is, and this plant is not sitting in a laboratory or a specialty health food store. It is growing wild, in ditches and empty lots and farm field edges. Absolutely everywhere, across North America. So how did a plant this nutritious become so forgotten? That story is one of the most fascinating in the entire history of food. The plant is amaranth. Specifically, the wild species most commonly known as pigweed. Scientific names including Amaranthus retroflexus and Amaranthus palmeri. These are the same genus as the cultivated amaranth grain, sold in health food stores today for $5 a pound. The wild versions, growing free in every disturbed soil across America, are nutritionally almost identical to the expensive cultivated grain. Amaranth is ancient. We are talking about 8,000 years of human cultivation. Archaeological evidence shows amaranth being grown in Mexico as early as 6,000 BC. By the time the Aztec Empire was at its peak, in the 14 and 1500s, amaranth was one of the 3 great staple crops of the Americas, alongside corn and beans. The Aztecs called it huatle. It was so central to their civilization that it was used as currency. Tribute paid to the Aztec emperor included thousands of tons of amaranth every year, collected from across the empire. Entire cities survived on it. Armies marched on it. And then, Hernán Cortés arrived in 1519. And within a generation, one of the most nutritious staple crops in human history nearly vanished from the face of the earth. What happened next is a story that reveals exactly how fragile food knowledge really is, and why understanding plants like amaranth matters more today than ever. When Spanish conquistadors conquered the Aztec Empire, they faced a practical problem. The indigenous population was enormous, disciplined, fed, and spiritually motivated. Their food system, centered on corn, beans, and amaranth, made them remarkably self-sufficient. The Spanish colonial strategy was not only military, it was nutritional. Control the food, and you control the people. Cortés and the colonial administration banned amaranth cultivation. Fields were destroyed. Stores were burned. Indigenous people found growing amaranth faced severe punishment. Why amaranth specifically? Because amaranth was deeply woven into Aztec religious ceremony. The Spanish church saw it as a barrier to conversion. By destroying the crop, they simultaneously attacked the food system and the spiritual practice in a single blow. The result was one of the most dramatic nutritional collapses in recorded history. A population that had been nourished by complete protein from amaranth for generations was suddenly cut off from it. The cascading effects on health, on population, on resistance, contributed to the rapid collapse of indigenous civilization that Spanish conquest depended on. But amaranth could not be completely killed. It is a weed at its core. Seeds survived in hidden stores. Plants grew wild in abandoned fields. Indigenous knowledge passed quietly from generation to generation through 500 years of suppression. Today, amaranth is experiencing a genuine revival. Researchers, nutritionists, and agricultural scientists have rediscovered what the Aztecs knew for millennia, and what they are finding in modern laboratories confirms everything the ancient world understood intuitively. This plant is genuinely extraordinary. Let's talk about the actual numbers, because when you see the full nutritional profile of amaranth, you will understand why civilizations built empires on this grain. Protein. 1 cup of cooked amaranth, about 250 grams, delivers 9 grams of complete protein. That is more than a large egg. And remember, it is complete protein with all 9 essential amino acids in excellent proportions. Amaranth is particularly rich in lysine, an amino acid that is critically deficient in most other grains. Wheat is low in lysine. Corn is low in lysine. Rice is low in lysine. This is why populations that rely entirely on a single grain often develop protein deficiency, even when eating plenty of food. Amaranth solves this problem completely. The digestibility of amaranth protein is outstanding. Studies show it is absorbed at approximately 90% efficiency, comparable to milk protein and significantly better than most plant proteins. Your body actually uses amaranth protein effectively. Now let's compare it honestly to quinoa, the grain most people think of as the gold standard for plant-based protein. Quinoa contains about 8 grams of protein per cooked cup. Amaranth contains 9 grams. Amaranth wins, and it grows wild as a weed, while quinoa costs $5 a pound at the health food store. Iron. Amaranth seeds contain approximately 5 milligrams of iron per cooked cup. That is significant for a grain. Pair that with the naturally occurring vitamin C in amaranth leaves, and you have a food that actually enhances its own iron absorption. Calcium. 1 cup of cooked amaranth provides around 116 milligrams of calcium, roughly comparable to a third of a glass of milk, from a grain. That is genuinely unusual. Magnesium. Amaranth is exceptional for magnesium, providing over 100 milligrams per cooked cup. Most Americans are magnesium deficient. Amaranth alone could address that deficiency. Now, let's talk about the leaves, because most people focus only on the seeds. Amaranth leaves, the fresh greens from the same plant, are one of the most nutritious leafy vegetables on Earth. Fresh amaranth leaves contain significant amounts of vitamin A, vitamin C, calcium, iron, and folate. They taste mild and slightly earthy, similar to spinach but with a slightly firmer texture. Across South Asia, Southeast Asia, and West Africa, fresh amaranth leaves are a daily food. Cooked as a green vegetable, added to soups and stews, used in curries and stir-fries, eaten by billions of people every single day who have never forgotten what the Western world has only recently rediscovered. One plant, complete protein grain from the seeds, extraordinary nutritious greens from the leaves, a full nutritional package from the same plant that grows wild across every state in America. This is not ancient folklore. Modern nutritional science has thoroughly validated what Aztec civilization demonstrated through 8,000 years of practice. Research published in the journal Molecules documented amaranth's complete amino acid profile and confirmed its protein quality meets or exceeds World Health Organization standards for human nutrition. This is not marginal or close. It genuinely qualifies as high-quality protein by every modern measure. A study from the National Autonomous University of Mexico demonstrated that amaranth flour, when added to traditional corn-based diets, significantly improved protein status in children within months. The improvement was measurable, clinically significant, and achieved with a food that costs almost nothing to grow. NASA, interestingly, included Amaranth in its research on potential crops for long-duration space missions. The criteria were demanding: high nutrition density, compact growing requirements, complete protein, adaptability to challenging conditions. Amaranth passed every test. A weed that grows in parking lot cracks was considered seriously as a potential food source for astronauts in deep space. The Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations has formally recognized amaranth as one of the most promising crops for addressing global food security. Not as a curiosity, as a genuine solution. The science is unambiguous. And yet, most Americans have no idea they are walking past this plant every single day. So let's talk about how to actually identify, harvest, and use amaranth. Because knowing this plant exists is only the beginning. Amaranth, commonly called pigweed, grows upright with a central stem and branching side stems. It reaches anywhere from 2 to 8 feet tall, depending on growing conditions and species. The leaves are oval to diamond-shaped, with slightly wavy edges and a pointed tip. They are arranged alternately along the stem. The most reliable identifying feature is the flower spike. Amaranth produces dense, bristly clusters of tiny greenish or reddish flowers at the top of the plant and in the joints where leaves meet the stem. These spikes become loaded with seeds as the season progresses. If you see that characteristic bristly seed spike, you have found amaranth. One important safety note: only harvest amaranth from areas you know are clean. Roadsides that are regularly sprayed with herbicide or land adjacent to industrial sites are not safe sources. Look for plants in gardens, field edges, or disturbed ground that you know has not been treated with chemicals. This is genuinely important. For greens, harvest young leaves and tender growing tips when plants are between 6 inches and 2 feet tall. The younger the plant, the more tender and flavorful the leaves. Rinse thoroughly. Sauté with a little olive oil and garlic. Add to soups. Steam as a side dish. The flavor is mild, slightly earthy, very similar to spinach. Most people who try cooked amaranth greens are surprised by how good they taste. For seeds, wait until late summer or early autumn, when seed heads are mature and beginning to dry. The seeds should be dark-colored and dislodge easily when you run your finger along the spike. Harvest entire seed heads into a bag or bucket. At home, pour the mix of seeds and chaff from one container to another in a light breeze. The chaff blows away. The heavier seeds fall straight down. Repeat a few times until seeds are clean. To cook amaranth seeds, use 3 parts water to 1 part seeds. Bring to a boil, add the seeds, reduce heat, and simmer covered for 20 to 25 minutes. The result is a slightly thick, nutty, earthy grain, excellent as a porridge, as a side dish, or mixed into soups and stews. You can also grind dried amaranth seeds into flour and use it in baking, blended with other flours for excellent nutrition. So why, in 2025, does most of the Western world still not know about amaranth? The historical suppression is 500 years behind us. The science is clear. The plant is literally everywhere. The answer is partly agricultural. In the United States, several wild amaranth species, particularly Palmer amaranth, are classified as noxious weeds. And with good reason. Wild amaranth, in a commercial farm field, can devastate crop yields. It grows aggressively. It competes fiercely for water and nutrients. It has developed resistance to multiple herbicides, making it genuinely difficult to control in large-scale agriculture. This agricultural classification has nothing to do with nutrition. It has nothing to do with whether amaranth is safe or valuable to eat. It simply reflects the reality that an aggressive plant, in the wrong context, can cause serious economic damage to farmers. The noxious weed label is an agricultural management tool, not a nutritional judgment. The irony is striking. The same plant that destroys crops when growing unchecked is sold in health food stores as a premium superfood for $5 a pound. The difference is simply context and management. Wild amaranth in a cornfield is a problem. Cultivated amaranth in a home garden is exceptional food. The other reason it remains overlooked is simply the pace of food culture change. The Western world lost amaranth as a food during the colonial period. Rebuilding that knowledge, rebuilding the recipes and culinary traditions, takes generations. But that rebuilding is genuinely happening now. Quick question before we wrap up. Have you ever eaten amaranth? In any form? Seeds, leaves, flower? Drop it in the comments right now. I want to know how many people watching have already discovered this plant and how many are hearing about it for the very first time today. Amaranth. 8,000 years of human cultivation. The sacred staple of the greatest empire in pre-Columbian America, nearly destroyed by 500 years of colonial suppression, confirmed by modern science as one of the most complete and nutritious grains on Earth, growing wild as a so-called weed in every disturbed soil across North America. This is not a forgotten food. This is a rediscovered one, and the rediscovery is already happening. Health food stores stock cultivated amaranth. Chefs are cooking with it. Nutritionists are recommending it. And now, you know it is growing wild in the ditch beside your road. If this video showed you a plant worth knowing, subscribe to Famine Plant Secrets. We uncover extraordinary forgotten plants every single week.